Good morning, everyone. It's Friday. Yeah. Even though it's a short week, it's been a long week. Yeah, anyway. So, I haven't done a PSA for a little while. Unfortunately, I've been kind of busy, but it happens. Today, I'd like to do a PSA that talks about a play on words. Okay? I sell stuff sometimes, and I, I'm a big fan of Marketplace. And when I sell stuff, I try to talk the product up so people see it and they go, yeah, I think I'll buy that. All right. Well, I've noticed lately that a lot of people throw this word in there to make it sound better than what it really is. Okay. And that screen goes right in that eyeball. Look, it's kind of cool. Looks like I got a little blue lens in there. The fancy glasses. I'm going to shoot a ray out of it. Anyway, all right. Sorry, I'm digressing. All right, let's talk about the word vintage. Okay, so I've noticed when folks try to sell stuff, they'll throw the word vintage in there. Okay, and I get it. You're trying to say, it's vintage. It's kind of worth some money. They don't have very many of these anymore. I understand that. And before we go any further than that, I'm going to read you the actual definition of vintage. All right, so according to this, it says the year or place in which wine, especially wine of high quality, was produced. Okay, so we talk about a vintage wine, like a wine from 1972 that would be a certain vintage. Okay, now let's go a little bit farther than that. What does vintage mean when you're selling? Okay, if you're buying or selling, the term vintage has been defined for you. Those platforms define it and as anything that they didn't type this up very well. Anything 20 years or older. So unofficially, the definition of vintage is between 20 and 100 years old enough to be in fashion again. Okay, big key word there, in fashion again. Okay, now if we're talking about bell bottoms had a comeback a few years ago, and if you had a vintage set of bell bottoms from the 70s, you can say those are vintage bell bottoms. Okay, now if you have a knife that's rusted and chipped, okay, and you say I have a vintage knife, that is not vintage. That's old as hell, and it's rusty, and you might get 50 cents for it. Not $50, okay, 50 cents. You sometimes can say I have a vintage 1978 El Camino. Okay, number one, it wouldn't be vintage. That would be a classic. Okay? But if it's in a field with grass around it and a tree growing up the middle of it, that's a junky ass car. Okay, let's just throw it out there. So, let's stop using vintage to sell junk. Okay, and let's use the word vintage correctly. Okay, so we got that. No more vintage for crap. It's old. Okay, it's been sitting in your garage for 10 years or out in the field for 50. Okay, so let's just stick with words that work, like the vintage crap.